Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing on a really transformative time for, well, a global powerhouse, Berkshire Hathaway.
Right. And also the huge impact of Warren Buffett's giving.
Exactly. We're looking at his recent move from CEO at Berkshire and also digging into the sheer scale, the principles behind his philanthropy.
Yeah, the goal is really to pull out the key lessons here. What does this all mean for big business, for charity going forward?
It's pretty compelling, isn't it, how these two massive parts of his life, his influence, are kind of unfolding together.
It really is. You've got this generational shift happening at a legendary company.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you're seeing the ripples from these just historic philanthropic gifts keep spreading.
Both sides offer some deep insights, I think. Long-term vision, leadership, what you do with, well, extraordinary wealth.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the Berkshire Hathaway leadership change. The info we've got confirms Buffett stepped down as CEO after the last annual meeting.
Yep, that's right.
Nearly 6 decades running one company. I mean, that's almost unbelievable, isn't it? What does that kind of time at the top really signal?
Well, it speaks volumes, obviously, about his vision, his adaptability over, so many years.
Sure.
And appointing Greg Abel, who was already vice chair for the non-insurance side, that's a really significant move for succession.
A big piece of the business.
Huge. And, importantly, Buffett is staying on as chairman.
Right, so he's not just vanishing. His strategic input is still there.
Exactly.
Which is key.
Okay. To really get the scale of this change, we probably need to remember where Berkshire started. Our sources mentioned it was a textile company.
Yeah, textiles and cotton, way back in the 60s. It wasn't always this, massive investment conglomerate we see today.
So what was the turning point? What shifted things?
Well, Buffett's early strategy was all about finding undervalued companies. And that actually led him to Berkshire Hathaway itself.
Yeah, he started buying shares in 62, saw something there, and eventually took control in 1965. It wasn't like an overnight thing, more a gradual shift as he figured out where his investment ideas could really work best.
And from textiles, he then steered it into totally different areas: insurance with Geico, newspapers, all sorts of consumer businesses. It's like watching a master chess player. What was the connecting thread between these different buys?
His core philosophy. He was always looking for what he called permanent competitive advantages.
Okay.
Things that let a company consistently beat its rivals long term, like a really strong brand maybe, or serious cost advantages, network effects.
Like Coca-Cola, maybe? One of those famous ones?
Exactly, that kind of enduring appeal.
Yeah.
And he also really prioritized companies that had strong, trustworthy leaders already in place. That was big for him.
And the results? Just wow. The share price, our sources say, hit over $760,000 back in 65. Is that right?
Well, the value growth since 65 led to today's high prices, not 760K at 65. But the growth from that starting point has been absolutely astronomical over the decades.
Ah, okay. Got it. Still, that kind of long-term growth is staggering. What drove that?
It's really mixed, isn't it? Smart investment picks, obviously, but also holding for the long haul. And, crucially, the power of compounding returns.
Right.
Just reinvesting profits consistently, finding those undervalued gems again and again.
Yeah.
It built this huge portfolio of successful companies.
So, bringing this back to you, our listener, this whole leadership change, it really throws a spotlight on succession planning, doesn't it?
Definitely.
How do you hand over the reins, especially after someone's been there so long, and keep the magic going? Berkshire's way, with Abel inside already, Buffett still is chair. It's a fascinating approach.
It really is. And it does raise that question. Abel's been key, yes, but will we see any shifts? In strategy, maybe? Or just the style of leadership, even with Buffett still involved?
Yeah. The market's going to be watching that very closely, I imagine. Any subtle changes?
For sure.
Okay. Now, let's pivot to the other just monumental side of Buffett's legacy, his philanthropy. The sheer scale of the giving. It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
It truly is. The sources really highlight that huge pledge back in 2006, giving away the vast majority, like 99% of his fortune.
Oh.
That wasn't just, here's a big check. It was a fundamental statement about what wealth is for.
And the main place that money is going is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Primarily, yes. Though it's important, like you said, he also supports his children's foundations too. So it spreads out a bit.
Right. But why the huge focus on the Gates Foundation? What was the thinking there?
Well, from what we understand, it was about effectiveness. The Gates Foundation already had this massive infrastructure, right? They had the expertise in global health, development, and they could handle deploying that kind of capital efficiently. He basically saw them as the best partners to get the biggest bang for his buck, philanthropically speaking.
The numbers are just wild.
Yeah.
Over $57 billion donated so far. It's all sorts of humanitarian causes.
Yeah, it's staggering.
It really makes him stand out compared to others who might, handle their wealth very differently. What does giving it all away about his sort of core beliefs?
Well, it really underlines his idea that beyond a certain point, wealth comes with a responsibility to society. He put it pretty clearly, didn't he? That the financial river should return to the society that facilitated its generation.
Huh. Interesting way to put it.
It's not just charity as an afterthought. It's more like an obligation, a feeling that the money should be used for the greater good.
And that thinking led directly to the Giving Pledge, which he started with Bill Gates.
Right.
Getting the world's wealthiest people to commit publicly to giving away most of their fortunes. Has that actually worked? Has it made a difference?
Well, by all accounts, it's been pretty successful, at least in raising awareness and getting people to make those big commitments.
Okay.
It's hard to track every dollar, obviously, but it definitely seems to have encouraged a culture of, massive giving at that very top level. Lots of billionaires have signed on.
And the areas Buffett focuses on, health, education, poverty, they're so fundamental. Why those specifically, do we think?
It seems to stem from a belief in tackling root causes, basic human needs, health, for instance. Think about the Gates Foundation's work on polio.
Right.
The idea is that basic health is kind of step one for everything else, economic progress, individual potential. Same logic applies to education as a route out of poverty.
We should probably underscore the work the Gates Foundation actually does. Sources mention over $100 billion in funding, including Buffett's huge gifts. They're tackling massive global issues.
Absolutely massive disease, living conditions for millions.
What are some of the big impacts, things our listeners might know about?
Oh gosh, where to start? There's been huge progress in cutting childhood deaths, fighting diseases like HIV, TB, malaria, advances in agriculture to help food security, especially in developing nations, and their work in education, trying to improve things for disadvantaged kids. It's incredibly wide-ranging.
So, again, thinking about you, our listener, Buffett's philanthropy really brings up these big questions, doesn't it? About wealth, responsibility, society.
For sure.
His way of doing it is just such a powerful example of how fortunes can be used to tackle huge global problems. It makes you think about different ways people approach wealth.
Absolutely. And it also raises another point, his choice to mainly go through a big established player like the Gates Foundation. That sparks debate too.
How so?
Well, is it better to concentrate funding like that through one massive, efficient entity? Or could spreading it out more, maybe to lots of smaller groups, have a different kind of impact? Maybe just as valuable? It's a real question in philanthropy.
Interesting point. So, okay, as we try to pull this all together, we're really looking at this powerful kind of dual legacy, aren't we?
Exactly. You've got the business side. Buffett shaping Berkshire Hathaway over decades, this massive evolution.
Right.
And then you have the philanthropy side, this historic level of giving that's still shaping global efforts.
The leadership change at Berkshire, it's definitely a new chapter for a major, major global player. Investors, the whole business world, they'll be watching Greg Abel's performance closely.
No doubt. And at the same time, Buffett's giving continues to, make a real difference in millions of lives through the Gates Foundation and the family foundations.
It really makes you wonder about the long-term effects, doesn't it? How will Berkshire change under new leadership, even with Buffett still as chair?
Yeah, that's the multi-billion-dollar question for Berkshire, isn't it?
And what about the philanthropy? What's the lasting impact going to be from all those billions flowing through the Gates Foundation and the other initiatives over the coming years?
Well, Buffett staying as chairman definitely provides some stability, some continuity for Berkshire. But Abel will bring his own style, his own priorities, for sure. And on the giving side, the scale and the focus are just so significant. The impact through the Gates Foundation and his kids' foundations is set to last for a very, very long time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe here's something to leave you with. Think about that relationship, that tension maybe, between creating wealth and how it ultimately contributes back to society.
Yeah, it's a complex one.
The stories of Berkshire's incredible growth on one hand and Warren Buffett's just extraordinary commitment to giving it away on the other, they offer really compelling, maybe even contrasting views.
They really do.
What do these moves, the leadership change, the ongoing philanthropy, what might they tell us about where things are headed, both for business leadership and, for massive scale giving in our world?
It's definitely a lot to chew on, a really important dynamic to keep thinking about.